What if a single sentence spoken decades ago could inspire a kid to become a legend and move a leader to tears? This is that story. The sun blazed over Brasilia, painting the city in a golden haze, its wide boulevards humming with the rhythm of a typical morning. Politicians rushing to meetings, flags fluttering above government buildings, and the air thick with the weight of officialdom. Yet, beneath the surface of this ordinary day, something extraordinary was brewing. A moment that would ripple far beyond the marble halls and manicured lawns of the capital. In the heart of the city, a grand auditorium buzzed with anticipation, its polished floors reflecting the glow of chandeliers. The occasion was a ceremony to honor Brazilian athletes who had carried the nation's name across the globe, their triumphs a beacon of pride. Among them stood Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer legend whose name alone could ignite a stadium. He sat in the front row, his tailored suit sharp against the vibrant green and yellow of a Brazilian flag pin on his lapel. His face, usually a mask of confidence on the pitch, held a quiet intensity, his dark eyes scanning the room as if searching for something, or someone. Beside him, Ana, his childhood friend from Madeira, whispered encouragement, her presence a grounding force, her smile a reminder of the boy he once was. Across the aisle, Carlos, a seasoned journalist with a notepad already half filled, watched Ronaldo closely, sensing a story beyond the usual pomp of such events. The auditorium swelled with dignitaries, ministers, and reporters, all eyes on the stage where President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva sat, his weathered face warm with a familiar grin, his hands folded calmly in his lap. Lula, a man who had risen from the dust of Brazil's northeast to lead a nation, exuded a quiet strength, his presence commanding yet approachable. He nodded as speeches droned on, praising athletes for their contributions to Brazil's global image. Medals gleamed under the stage lights, applause rolled like waves, but Ronaldo remained still, his fingers brushing the edge of a small, white envelope tucked inside his suit jacket. That envelope, plain and unassuming, held a weight no one could see, a piece of his soul, inked in careful, deliberate strokes the night before. Before we dive in, drop a 1 in the comments if you're ready for a story that'll touch your heart, hit like if you're skeptical, and stick around. There's a surprise twist at the end. Ronaldo's mind drifted as the ceremony unfolded, the voices of speakers fading into a distant hum. He saw flashes of Madeira, the rugged island where he grew up, where the ocean roared and the streets were narrow and unforgiving. A boy with patched shoes, kicking a worn ball against cracked walls, dreaming of something bigger. He remembered the nights when hunger gnawed at his stomach, when his mother's tired eyes still sparkled with hope. It was Anna's family who had given him a lifeline, inviting him into their cramped living room to listen to a battered radio, its static crackling like a fire. One evening, through that radio, Lula's voice had cut through the noise, a voice raw with conviction, speaking of a Brazil where the poor could rise, where no one was doomed to fail. Those words had struck young Cristiano like a lightning bolt, planting a seed of belief that he could be more than his circumstances. Anna, barely older than him, had squeezed his hand that night, whispering, "You'll show them, Chris." Now, years later, here he was, a global icon. But that boy still lived inside him, clutching those words like a lifeline. The envelope in his pocket was his way of giving them back, of saying what he'd never said aloud. On stage, the ceremony marched forward. Athletes stepped up, shook hands, and posed for photos, their smiles polished for the cameras. Carlos scribbled notes, his pen moving faster as he noticed Ronaldo's stillness, the way his gaze lingered on Lula. The journalist's instincts flared. Something was coming, something unplanned. Ana leaned closer to Ronaldo, her voice soft but firm. "You sure about this?" she asked, her eyes searching his. Ronaldo nodded, his jaw tight, his hand brushing the envelope again. It wasn't just a letter. It was a confession, a debt repaid, a truth he'd carried for decades. He'd written it in his hotel room the previous night, the city's lights glittering outside as he poured his heart onto the page. Each word was a memory of struggle, of doubt, of a voice on a radio that had changed everything. He knew this moment wasn't just about him or Lula. It was about every kid like him, every dream that needed a spark to ignite. The auditorium's energy shifted as Ronaldo's name was called. The crowd erupted, a thunder of applause that shook the room. Cameras flashed, capturing the man who had redefined soccer, whose goals had become legend. He stood, his movements deliberate, his suit impeccable, but his eyes held a vulnerability few ever saw. As Ronaldo climbed the stage steps, the air seemed to thicken, the crowd's cheers softening into a hush. Lula rose to greet him, his smile broad, unaware of the storm of emotion about to break. Ronaldo's handshake was firm, his gaze steady, but there was something more, a flicker of hesitation, a silent plea. The president clapped him on the shoulder, praising his contributions to Brazil's pride, his voice warm with sincerity. The crowd leaned forward, expecting Ronaldo to return to his seat, to follow the script. But he didn't. Instead, he reached into his jacket, his fingers closing around the envelope. The room fell silent, a collective breath held. Carlos's pen froze mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing. Ana clasped her hands, her heart pounding for her friend. "President," Ronaldo said, his voice low but clear, cutting through the stillness like a blade. "Before I go, I need to give you this." He held out the envelope, its edges slightly creased from his grip. "It's not a request or a favor. It's just something you need to read." Lula's smile faltered, replaced by a curious frown. He took the envelope with both hands, his fingers tracing the handwritten name on the front. To President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The moment hung heavy, the auditorium a sea of wide eyes and hushed whispers. No one had expected this. Not the organizers, not the ministers, not even Ana, who knew the letter's weight but hadn't anticipated its delivery here, now, in front of hundreds. Ronaldo's face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with purpose. He gave Lula a small nod, as if to say, "Trust me." Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his seat, the crowd parting in his wake. Lula stood frozen, the envelope in his hands like a fragile relic. He looked down at it, then back at Ronaldo, searching for answers in the soccer star's retreating figure. The ceremony resumed, but the energy had shifted. Carlos scribbled furiously, his mind racing with questions. What was in that letter? Why had Ronaldo, a man who commanded stadiums, chosen such a quiet, personal gesture? Ana reached for Ronaldo's hand as he sat, squeezing it gently. "You did it," she whispered, pride in her voice. Ronaldo didn't respond, his eyes fixed on the stage where Lula still held the envelope, his expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. The speeches continued, but they felt hollow now, overshadowed by the unspoken weight of Ronaldo's gesture. Lula's fingers tightened around the envelope, his thumb brushing the paper as if it might reveal its secrets through touch alone. He smiled for the cameras, shook more hands, but his mind was elsewhere, tethered to the mystery in his hands. Carlos, ever the journalist, leaned toward a colleague, whispering, "That's the story. Whatever's in that envelope, it's bigger than this whole event." The colleague nodded, already typing a headline on his phone. Ana watched Ronaldo, seeing the boy she'd known in his tense shoulders, his clenched jaw. She remembered the nights they'd spent dreaming of escape, of a world beyond Madeira's poverty. Lula's voice had been a beacon then, a promise that had carried them both. Now, Ronaldo had returned that promise. Not with fanfare, but with a simple letter, a piece of his heart offered in silence. As the ceremony neared its end, Lula's composure began to crack. His smile, so steady before, wavered. He glanced at the envelope again, its weight pulling at him. He knew he couldn't read it here, not with eyes on him, not with the world watching. But the urge was overwhelming, a need to understand what Ronaldo, a man who had everything, felt compelled to say. The crowd applauded the final speaker, but Lula's mind was far from the stage. He saw flashes of his own past, factory floors, union halls, the faces of people who believed in him when no one else did. Had his words, spoken decades ago, reached someone like Ronaldo? The thought stirred something deep, a mix of hope and fear. He signaled to an aide, his voice low. "I need a moment." The aide nodded, guiding him toward a side door, away from the cameras and the crowd. Ronaldo watched him go, his heart pounding, knowing the letter's words were about to unfold. Ana squeezed his hand again, her eyes shining. Carlos, still writing, felt the story taking shape, a moment that would echo far beyond this room. Lula slipped into a quiet chamber, the envelope trembling slightly in his hands. The door closed behind him, muffling the auditorium's noise. He sat at a small table, the letter before him like a sacred text. His fingers hesitated, then tore the paper gently, revealing a single sheet covered in Ronaldo's neat, deliberate handwriting. The first line hit like a wave. President Lula, you'll never know how one sentence you spoke changed a boy's life forever. Lula's breath caught. He leaned back, the words pulling him into a story he hadn't expected. A story of a boy in Madeira, a radio, and a voice that refused to let him give up. The room seemed to shrink, the world narrowing to the page in his hands. Outside, the ceremony ended, but the real story was just beginning, its ripples already spreading, ready to touch a nation. The door clicked shut behind Lula, sealing him in the quiet of the small chamber, a stark contrast to the auditorium's fading applause. The room was modest, its walls lined with bookshelves, a single window casting soft light across a wooden table. Lula sat, the envelope now open, its contents, a single sheet of paper, resting before him like a fragile artifact. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of what he held. Ronaldo's letter. The soccer star's gesture had stunned the crowd, broken the ceremony's rhythm, and left a question mark hanging in the air. Lula's eyes traced the neat handwriting, the ink bold yet careful, as if each word had been chosen with reverence. He leaned forward, his breath shallow, and began to read. President Lula, you'll never know how one sentence you spoke changed a boy's life forever. The opening line hit like a gust of wind, stirring memories Lula hadn't touched in years. He paused, his gaze drifting to the window where Brasilia's skyline shimmered in the heat. A boy's life. Ronaldo's life. The thought was almost too vast to grasp. He steadied himself and read on, the letter pulling him into a world far from the polished halls of power. In the auditorium, the ceremony had ended, but the buzz lingered. Guests milled about, their voices a low hum of speculation. Carlos, the journalist, stood near the exit, his notepad brimming with scribbles. He'd caught every detail: Ronaldo's pause, Lula's hesitation, the envelope's quiet handover. His gut told him this was more than a photo op. It was a story that could move people. He glanced at Ana, who lingered by Ronaldo's side, her face a mix of pride and nerves. Ronaldo himself sat quietly, his hands clasped, staring at the empty stage. Carlos approached, his voice gentle but probing. Cristiano, can you tell me anything about that letter? Ronaldo's eyes met his, steady but guarded. It's personal, he said, his voice low. It's for him. Carlos nodded, respecting the boundary but burning with curiosity. He jotted down Ronaldo's words, sensing the letter's power even without knowing its contents. Ana touched Ronaldo's arm, whispering, He's reading it now, isn't he? Ronaldo nodded, his jaw tight, his mind far away, back to the streets of Madeira where it all began. The letter unfolded Ronaldo's story in vivid strokes. I was just a kid in Madeira, maybe 10, living in a house with more leaks than walls. Lula's eyes softened, picturing a young Cristiano, all elbows and dreams, navigating a world of scarcity. My dad worked long hours, my mom cleaned houses, but some nights we had nothing but bread and water. The words were raw, unadorned, yet they carried a quiet dignity. Lula felt a pang, remembering his own childhood, the hunger that gnawed like a living thing. Ronaldo wrote of Ana's family, their tiny home a refuge where he'd escaped the cold. They had a radio, old and crackly, but it worked. One night, we heard you speak, President. You were talking about Brazil, about how the poor deserved a chance, how no one was born to fail. Lula's breath hitched. He remembered those speeches, delivered in sweaty union halls, his voice hoarse but fierce. He'd never known who they reached, only that he had to keep speaking. Now, here was proof. A boy in Portugal, listening through static, clinging to those words like a lifeline. Flashbacks flooded Ronaldo's mind as he sat in the auditorium, the chatter around him fading. He saw himself at 10, crouched by that radio, Ana beside him, her eyes wide as Lula's voice filled the room. The future isn't written, Lula had said. You write it with your hands, your heart, your fight. Ronaldo hadn't understood every word, but the feeling stuck, a fire kindled in his chest. Ana's father, a fisherman with calloused hands, had nodded solemnly, saying, That man's right, Chris. Don't let anyone tell you different. Then there was Miguel, his first coach, a gruff man who saw something in Ronaldo's relentless sprints. his refusal to quit even when the other kids laughed at his patched cleats. Miguel had pushed him, shouting, "You're not just playing for you, Cristiano, you're playing for everyone who never got a shot." Those words, layered over Lula's, became Ronaldo's armor. He'd carried them through every rejection, every injury, every doubt. The letter was his way of closing that circle, of thanking the man whose voice had reached him across oceans and years. Lula read on, his eyes growing wet. "That night changed me, President. I decided I wouldn't just survive, I'd prove I could win." Ronaldo wrote of kicking a battered ball until dark, of running laps in the rain, of dreaming of stadiums while sleeping on a thin mattress. "Your words made me believe I wasn't nothing. They gave me a reason to fight." Lula's throat tightened. He thought of his own battles, factory strikes, prison cells, the endless grind of politics. He'd spoken for people like Ronaldo, but to know his words had shaped a global icon? It was almost too much. The letter shifted, growing reflective. "When I started making money, people said I should thank my talent, my mom, my coach. I did, but you were always on that list, even if I never said it out loud." Lula's hand brushed his cheek, catching a tear. He saw Ronaldo not as the polished star, but as the boy who'd heard him, who'd carried his message like a torch. "You said the poor don't fail. They rise. I've spent my life trying to prove you right." Outside, Carlos was working the room, piecing together the story. He spoke to an aide who'd seen Lula slip away, her eyes misty. "The president looked shaken," she confided. Carlos's pen flew, his mind racing. He overheard guests whispering about the letter, their voices tinged with awe. "Ronaldo didn't have to do that," one said. "It's like he was speaking for all of us." Carlos's phone buzzed with messages from his editor, demanding updates. He typed a quick reply. "This is big." Ronaldo gave Lula a letter. It's personal, emotional, crowds buzzing. He glanced at Ronaldo, who hadn't moved, his face a mask of calm. Anna leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "You okay, Chris?" Ronaldo nodded, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering with the weight of what he'd done. He'd bared his soul, not to the world but to one man, and now he waited, wondering if his words had landed. Lula reached the letter's final lines, his heart pounding. "Today, I'm here because of you, President. Not just the trophies or the fame, but the belief that I could be more. Thank you for being a voice when I had none." Ronaldo's signature was simple, no flourish, just his name in bold strokes. Lula set the paper down, his hands shaking. He covered his face, letting the tears come freely. The letter wasn't just gratitude. It was a mirror, reflecting his own life back at him. He saw himself at Ronaldo's age, shining shoes, dreaming of a world where he mattered. He saw the crowds he'd spoken to, their faces blurred but hopeful. To know his words had reached a boy in Madeira, had helped forge a legend, it humbled him, broke him open. He thought of his critics, the endless battles, the weight of leadership. But this letter, this quiet gift, made it all worth it. For a moment, he wasn't a president, just a man, raw and human, holding a piece of someone's heart. Carlos's instincts were on fire now. He slipped outside, calling a source in Lula's team. "Any word on what's happening?" he asked. The source was cryptic. "Lula's in a room alone. He's reading it. It's heavy." Carlos hung up, his mind spinning. He pictured the headline. Ronaldo's letter moves Lula to tears. But it was more than that. It was a story of connection, of how a single voice could echo across time and borders. Back in the auditorium, Anna watched Ronaldo, her heart aching for him. She remembered the boy who'd cried when his dad left, who'd vowed to make his mom proud. "You did the right thing," she said softly. Ronaldo's lips twitched, a faint smile. "I hope so," he murmured. He thought of Miguel, who'd died years ago, never seeing Ronaldo's rise. He thought of his mom, who'd cried hearing Lula's speech. This letter was for them, too. Lula stood, folding the letter carefully, tucking it back into the envelope. His face was marked by tears, but his eyes held a new resolve. He couldn't let this moment pass quietly. He needed to respond, not with politics, but with truth. He stepped back into the auditorium, the crowd falling silent as he took the stage. Ronaldo looked up, his heart lurching. Anna gripped his hand. Carlos's pen hovered, ready. Lula held the envelope aloft, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "This," he said, "is a gift I never expected." The room hung on his words. Cristiano Ronaldo gave me something today, a letter that reminded me why I started this fight. It's not about medals or titles, it's about reaching someone, somewhere, when they need it most. He paused, his eyes finding Ronaldo's. This letter made me cry. It made me remember who I was, who we all are. The crowd erupted, applause rolling like thunder, but Ronaldo stayed seated, his hand over his heart, a silent thank you. Lula's words washed over him, a balm for the boy he'd once been. The letter had done its work, and the world was about to feel its echo. The auditorium's applause had faded, but the echo of Ronaldo's letter lingered, spreading like wildfire beyond Brasilia's gleaming halls. In the days that followed, the story took on a life of its own, a spark that ignited conversations across Brazil and beyond. Social media buzzed with fragments of Lula's speech, grainy videos of Ronaldo's quiet handover, and speculation about the letter's contents. Hashtags like #RonaldoLetter and #LulaTears trended, uniting strangers in a shared sense of wonder. In a small cafe in Sao Paulo, a barista scrolled through posts, her eyes misty as she read comments from people moved by the story. In Rio, a teacher paused her lesson to tell her students about it, their young faces rapt. Carlos, the journalist, sat at his desk, his article already live, its headline bold. Ronaldo's letter to Lula, a moment of heart that stopped a nation. His words painted the scene, the envelope, Lula's tears, Ronaldo's silence, and readers devoured it, sharing it thousands of times. The story wasn't just about a soccer star and a president. It was about hope, about words that could change a life. Ronaldo, back in Madeira, felt the weight of it all, but he carried it lightly, his heart unburdened for the first time in years. He'd said what he needed to say, and the world was listening. Ronaldo stood at the edge of a dusty soccer field in his hometown, the ocean's roar a familiar backdrop. Kids darted around, their laughter sharp and bright, chasing a ball under the midday sun. Anna was there, her hair tied back, helping organize a youth camp Ronaldo had funded. She watched him, noting the ease in his shoulders, the way his eyes softened as he kicked a ball to a shy girl in worn sneakers. "You're different today," Anna said, handing him a water bottle. Ronaldo smiled, a real smile, not the polished one he wore for cameras. "Feels like I closed the door," he said, his voice low, "like I finally told the truth." Anna nodded, remembering the nights they'd spent dreaming of escape, Lula's voice crackling through that old radio. She'd urged him to write the letter, sensing it would free him. Now, seeing him here, surrounded by kids who saw him as a hero, she knew she'd been right. The field hummed with energy, the kids unaware that their idol had just bared his soul to a president, but they felt his warmth, his belief in them. One girl, Maria, lingered nearby, clutching a notebook, her eyes wide with awe. She was 14, a striker with a fierce kick, and Ronaldo's story had struck a chord deep within her. In Brasilia, Lula sat in his office, the letter now framed on his desk, its words etched in his mind. He'd read it again that morning, each line a reminder of why he'd fought so long. His aide, Clara, knocked softly, her face lit with excitement. "The story's everywhere, sir," she said, showing him her phone. News outlets had picked up Carlos's article, spinning it into headlines that captured the nation's heart. Ronaldo's gratitude moves Lula to tears. Talk shows dissected the moment. Pundits debated its meaning, but Lula cared little for the noise. What mattered was the letter itself, a testament to the power of a single voice. He thought of his own past, the hunger, the strikes, the speeches he'd given to half-empty rooms. He'd never known who heard him, but now he did. Ronaldo, a boy in Madeira, had carried his words into stadiums, into history. Lula leaned back, his eyes tracing the letter's frame. He'd asked Clara to digitize it, to preserve it in his institute's archives, a symbol of what words could do. But he wanted more than preservation. He wanted to respond, to honor Ronaldo's gesture with action. Carlos, meanwhile, was chasing the story's next chapter. His phone buzzed with messages from readers, colleagues, even strangers who felt the letter's ripple. He sat in a Brazilian newsroom, sifting through comments online. One caught his eye from a woman named Sofia. "I heard Lula speak when I was a kid too. It made me believe I could be a doctor. Thank you, Ronaldo, for reminding us to say thank you." Carlos scribbled it down, his heart racing. This wasn't just a story, it was a movement. He called Ana, hoping for a quote. "People want to know more," he said. "What's Cristiano feeling now?" Ana's voice was steady, protective. "He's happy, Carlos. Let him have this moment." Carlos respected her, but he couldn't stop. He tracked down Miguel's old assistant, a man named Paulo, who'd coached Ronaldo as a boy. "Cristiano was relentless," Paulo said, his voice thick. He'd talk about proving himself, about showing the world a poor kid could win. I think Lula's words lit that fire. Carlos's fingers flew across his keyboard, weaving Paulo's memories into his next piece, the story growing bigger with every word. Back in Madeira, Ronaldo knelt beside Maria, the young striker, who shyly handed him her notebook. "I wrote something," she said, her voice trembling. "For you." Ronaldo opened it, his eyes scanning her careful handwriting. "Mr. Ronaldo, your story made me believe I can make it too. My dad says girls don't play soccer, but I'm going to prove him wrong like you proved everyone wrong." Ronaldo's throat tightened. He saw himself in her, the same fire, the same hunger. "Keep writing your story, Maria," he said, his voice soft but firm. "And don't let anyone tell you it's not yours to write." Maria beamed, clutching her notebook like a treasure. Ana watched, her eyes glistening. She thought of the letter Ronaldo had written, how it had started as a whisper in their childhood and grown into something that moved a nation. She hugged Maria, whispering, "You're next." The field buzzed with kids, their dreams alive in the air, fueled by Ronaldo's quiet act of gratitude. Lula, inspired, decided to act. He invited Ronaldo to a private dinner at the presidential residence. No cameras, no press, just two men, a table under a sprawling mango tree, and a shared understanding. Clara helped arrange it, her hands trembling as she sent the invite. Ronaldo arrived in a simple shirt, no entourage, just Ana by his side. Lula greeted them warmly, his eyes crinkling with a smile. "You stirred up quite a storm, Cristiano," he said, pouring coffee. Ronaldo laughed, a rare, unguarded sound. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. They sat, the evening breeze soft, and talked, not as president and star, but as men who'd known struggle. Lula spoke of his childhood, the dirt floors, the dreams he'd carried. Ronaldo shared stories of Madeira, of Ana's family, of Miguel's tough love. Ana chimed in, her voice light but poignant, recalling how Lula's radio speech had made her mother cry, had given them all hope. The conversation turned to Brazil's youth, to the kids like Maria who needed a spark. "We can do more," Lula said, his voice firm. "Your camp, your story, it's a start." Ronaldo nodded, his mind already turning to new projects, new ways to give back. The dinner stretched late, the table littered with empty plates, the air thick with laughter and memory. Lula showed Ronaldo the framed letter, now hanging in a quiet corner of his office. "This stays with me," he said, his voice low. "It's more than a letter. It's proof we matter." Ronaldo touched the frame, his fingers hovering over the glass. He saw his younger self, the boy who'd believed because of Lula. "You gave me that, President," he said. "I just gave it back." Ana's eyes shone, her heart full. She thought of Maria, of the kids at the camp, of how one letter had sparked a chain of hope. Outside, the night was still, the stars bright above Brasilia. Carlos, unaware of the dinner, published his follow-up piece, weaving in Sofia's comment, Paulo's memories, and the nation's response. It went viral, shared by people who'd never met Ronaldo or Lula, but felt their story in their bones. In a small apartment in Salvador, Maria read it, her notebook open, pen in hand, writing her own letter to the future. The ripple grew. Schools invited Ronaldo to speak, but he declined, preferring quiet visits to community centers. He and Ana expanded the youth camp, naming it after Miguel, a tribute to the coach who'd seen his spark. Maria joined, her confidence growing with every goal she scored. Lula, meanwhile, spoke of the letter in speeches, not as a boast, but as a call to action. "One voice can change a life," he told crowds, his voice steady. "Let's be that voice." He met with youth leaders inspired by Ronaldo's camp and pushed for more programs to reach kids like the boy Cristiano had been. Carlos kept writing, his stories a thread connecting strangers, from Sofia the doctor to Maria the dreamer. The letter, once a private gesture, became a symbol of gratitude's power, of how a single moment could unite a nation. Ronaldo, back in Madeira, stood by the ocean one evening, the waves crashing softly. He thought of Lula, of Ana, of Miguel, of Maria. He'd written his truth, and it had found its way. The world felt lighter, the stars brighter, as if the universe itself had heard. The story of Cristiano Ronaldo handing President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva a handwritten letter during a ceremony in Brasilia is more than a moment of celebrity and politics intersecting. It's a deeply human tale, one that resonates with raw emotion and universal truths about gratitude, resilience, and the impact of words. As I reflect on this narrative, I'm struck by its layers, how a single act of vulnerability from a global icon can ripple through a nation, stirring hearts and sparking conversations. The emotions it evokes and the lessons it offers are profound, offering a blueprint for how we can live with intention, connect authentically, and inspire others in our own lives. At its core, this story is about connection between a boy in Madeira, Portugal, and a voice on a radio, between a soccer legend and a president, between past struggles and present triumphs. When Ronaldo, a man who commands stadiums, chose to express his gratitude through a simple letter, he stripped away the glitz of fame to reveal something raw, a debt to a moment that shaped him. Reading the story, I felt a mix of awe and humility. Awe at how one sentence from Lula, spoken decades ago, could ignite a spark in a young Cristiano, pushing him to chase dreams despite poverty and doubt. Humility at the realization that we all carry such moments in our lives, words, gestures, or kindnesses that alter our paths, often without the giver ever knowing. The image of Lula, alone in a quiet room, tears streaming as he read Ronaldo's words, hit me hard. It's a reminder that even the most powerful among us are human, moved by sincerity, haunted by their own pasts, and hungry for proof that their efforts mattered. The emotions stirred by this story are complex. There's the warmth of gratitude, as Ronaldo honors the man whose words gave him hope. There's the ache of shared struggle, as both men's stories, Ronaldo's childhood hunger, Lula's factory days, echo the universal fight to rise above hardship. There's the quiet power of vulnerability, as Ronaldo risks judgment to share a piece of his soul, and Lula lets his guard down to weep openly. For me, these emotions stirred memories of my own life. Teachers who believed in me, friends who listened when I felt lost, even strangers whose small acts of kindness shifted my perspective. Like Ronaldo, I've carried those moments silently, unsure how to repay them. His letter feels like a challenge, to name those debts, to speak them aloud, to let gratitude breathe. One of the most striking lessons from this story is the enduring power of words. Lula's radio speech, delivered to an unseen audience, wasn't just rhetoric, it was a lifeline. It reached a boy in Madeira, planting a seed that grew into a global legacy. This makes me think about the words I speak daily, often without much thought. A quick compliment, a word of encouragement, even a casual conversation, any of these could be someone's spark. I recall a time in high school when a coach told me, "You're tougher than you think." It was a throwaway line to him, but it carried me through moments of self-doubt, much like Lula's words did for Ronaldo. The lesson here is clear. Our words matter, sometimes more than we'll ever know. In our fast-paced digital world, where texts and tweets fly by, taking a moment to speak with intention can change someone's trajectory. I'm inspired to be more mindful, to choose words that uplift, to assume someone is always listening. Another lesson is the courage it takes to be vulnerable. Ronaldo didn't have to write that letter. He could have basked in the ceremony's applause, shaken Lula's hand, and moved on. Instead, he chose a risky personal gesture, one that broke protocol and bared his heart. That takes guts. In American culture, we often prize stoicism, especially in men. Athletes like Ronaldo are expected to be unbreakable, larger than life. Yet his letter was a quiet rebellion against that, a statement that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's strength. I think of times I've held back gratitude or emotion, fearing judgment or rejection. Ronaldo's example pushes me to rethink that. Whether it's telling a friend how much they mean to me or admitting a mistake at work, vulnerability builds bridges. It's a lesson I want to apply daily, being open about my struggles, my gratitude, my humanity, even when it feels uncomfortable. Gratitude itself is a central theme here, and it's a practice we can all lean into. Ronaldo's letter wasn't just a thank you, it was an acknowledgement of a debt that shaped his life. In our culture, we often focus on individual achievement, Ronaldo's goals, Lula's policies. But this story reminds us that no one succeeds alone. Behind every victory are voices, hands, and moments that lift us up. I'm reminded of my own Lulas, the people who've nudged me forward, from my parents' sacrifices to a co-worker's quiet support during a tough project. Ronaldo's act inspires me to express gratitude actively, not just feel it. I've started writing notes to people who've impacted me, a mentor, a neighbor, even a barista who always remembers my order with a smile. These small acts, like Ronaldo's letter, ripple outward, reminding others they're seen and valued. In a world that can feel divided, gratitude is a glue that binds us. The story also teaches resilience, a quality both Ronaldo and Lula embody. Ronaldo's childhood wasn't easy. Poverty, a fractured family, the weight of being less than in a world that often dismisses the poor. Yet he clung to Lula's message that no one is born to fail, using it as fuel to outwork everyone. Lula, too, rose from a shoeshine boy to a president, defying odds through sheer grit. Their stories hit home for me, especially in moments when life feels overwhelming. I think of times I've faced setbacks, a job rejection, a personal loss, and how easy it is to feel defeated. Ronaldo and Lula remind me that resilience isn't about avoiding pain. It's about pushing through it, finding a spark of hope, and holding on. For me, this means setting small, daily goals when things get tough. Writing 500 words, running a mile, calling a friend. These acts build momentum, much like Ronaldo's relentless training or Lula's tireless speeches. Community is another lesson that shines through. Ronaldo didn't write his letter alone. Ana, his childhood friend, encouraged him, and Miguel, his coach, saw his potential. Lula's words reached Ronaldo through Ana's family radio, a shared moment in a cramped living room. This web of support reminds me that we're stronger together. In American culture, we often celebrate the self-made myth, but this story dismantles it. I've started leaning more on my own community, friends, family, colleagues, whether it's asking for advice or offering help. I've joined a local volunteer group inspired by Ronaldo's youth camp to give back to kids in my neighborhood. It's a small step, but it feels like planting seeds, just as Lula's words did for Ronaldo. The ripple effect of Ronaldo's letter is perhaps the most powerful lesson. What started as a private gesture became a national phenomenon, inspiring people like Maria, the young striker, to dream bigger, and Carlos, the journalist, to tell stories that matter. It shows how one act of sincerity can spark a chain reaction. I've seen this in my own life. When I thank someone genuinely, it often inspires them to pass it on. Last week, I wrote a note to a teacher who helped me through college. She shared it with her students, encouraging them to thank someone in their lives. That's the magic of Ronaldo's letter. It's a call to act, to create ripples of our own. Whether it's mentoring a kid, sharing a kind word, or starting a project, we all have the power to inspire. Applying these lessons to daily life feels both daunting and exciting. I'm committing to 3 practices inspired by this story. First, I'll speak with purpose, choosing words that uplift, knowing they might reach someone who needs them. Second, I'll embrace vulnerability, sharing my gratitude and struggles openly, even when it's scary. Third, I'll build community, investing in the people around me and giving back where I can. These aren't grand gestures like Ronaldo's letter, but they're steps toward a life of impact. I imagine a world where we all take a page from Ronaldo and Lula, where we speak, act, and thank with intention, knowing our actions echo far beyond us. This story leaves me with a final thought. We're all connected, our lives interwoven by moments we might never fully understand. Ronaldo's letter to Lula isn't just their story, it's ours. It's a reminder to pause, reflect, and act on the gratitude and resilience within us. It's a call to be someone's voice in the dark, to write our own letters, to keep fighting for a better tomorrow. So I'm challenging myself and you to find one person who's shaped your life and thank them. Write a note, make a call, or just say it face to face. Let's start a ripple right here, right now. Wow, what a story, right? Ronaldo's letter to Lula reminds us all of the power of gratitude and the impact we can have on each other. If this moved you as much as it did me, hit that like button to spread the love and share this video with someone who needs a little inspiration today. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story like this. And in the comments, tell us, who's someone you'd write a letter to and what would you say? Let's keep this conversation going. Your story could be the spark someone else needs. See you in the next video.